Hello, friends. Thank you for joining me today. I am just about to start doing a painting of my granddaughter, Lake. This is a little bit of an IOU. She is 5, nearly 6 years old, and around my studio and in my stuff, she sees several sketches of her older brother, Israel, and almost none of her. So, she, being a sharp young lady, she says, "When are you going to do my portrait?" So the answer is finally today. I'm going to start. I'm going to do her portrait. The reason I have so many pictures of her older brother and none of her, I have a few sketches, but that's all, is because when Israel was born and when he was 2 years old and younger, that was a season in my life where I was working particularly aggressively on portraiture. So I was looking for anything and anybody to do a portrait of. My, 1 and 2 year old grandson was, of course, a great subject. That season came and went. I have, in the years in between, done portraits periodically, but as you know, it's not my forte. Although I reserve I reserve the right as a growing artist, if things go that way, I reserve the right to become a portrait artist. Not holding my breath. Don't think that's going to happen, but I hold the future very loosely. Be that as it may, by the way, I'm cleaning out my terpenoid jar here, Gamsol, whatever's in it. Be that as it may, I love doing portraits, if for no other reason, there are other reasons, but if for no other reason than the fact that they are the last great frontier for me as an artist. Portraits are the hardest thing in the world. Realistic, accurate, perfect likeness. Portraits are the hardest thing in the world to draw. Hi, Nellie. Good to see you. Hi, Janusz. Good to see you guys. Thanks for chatting. So anyway, so this is a yes, you should, Janusz. You should be indeed. Hello, Bruno. Good to hear you today or see you today. I'm going to be doing a portrait of my granddaughter. Now, special announcement. At the same time, hi, Jane. Jane, are you paying attention? Because I think you took advantage of this a couple years ago, several years ago. And I said at the time I would never do portraits cheaper. And that's true, because back many years ago, I was doing them for what, $250, $300. Okay, so here's the deal. Between now and Christmas, I will do a portrait for $500. Now, I'll have to get a little bit more specific, and I'll put the details in the description under this video. You have to provide the photo, and it has to be a good photo, and preferably, oh my goodness, please don't send a flash photo. Anyway, a photograph of you, mother, father, sister, brother, daughter, granddaughter, whatever it may be, for $500, 18 by 24. What if you have 2 grandchildren, you want them both? That's where it gets complicated. So, okay, I'll deal with that in the fine print. No, you don't get 2 kids for the price of 1, or 3, or 4, or 17. No. Basically $500 roughly per child, per portrait. Slight discount for multiple images. Anyway, just in time for Christmas, some of you might want to give a portrait as a gift, and I will guarantee my work. If you don't like it, you send it back and I fix it. Over the years, I'm happy to say I have progressed and advanced and matured and gotten better at portraiture. Okay, so I was going to show you, first of all, the portrait of my granddaughter, Lake. There she is, 5, nearly 6 years old. And lovely young lady, as are all my grandchildren, of course. And I'll explain real quickly about the grid, a grid on her face and here. This is not the same as a grid where you do, and do square for square. It has some of that effect. This, however, is a grid. I learned this from his name's escaping me. I talk about him all the time down in Austin, Texas. Michael Carter, Mark. Mark, when I get in art brain, my linguistic brain goes out the window. I can use one of these measuring tools. Now, since I've gone this far, let me go ahead and say that this here is just simply a more high-tech version of this. And Mark Carter, or do this, they will start out their portraits by doing tons and tons and tons. So the grid here basically provides anchor points. Okay, so you can measure from here to here, and so on and so on and so forth. And Mark teaches a technique where he uses this, I would guess, for roughly 2 hours, hour and a half, 2 hours, maybe more, before he makes his first portrait-ish mark. And nothing wrong with that, but it sounds dreadfully monotonous to me. Plus, in my mind, that is high-class, very sophisticated cheating. Now, you've heard me say before, cheating is legal, absolutely legal, but every time you cheat, including this kind of cheating, your brain shrinks. I don't like the idea of my brain shrinking. So I'm going to practice what I preach today, and I'm going to start doing, her name is Lake, Miriam Lake, like a body of water, Lake. Pretty name, pretty girl. I'm going to start the old-fashioned way. Other than the grid helps me a little bit, what it's doing there mainly is getting her face the right size. I went downstairs a while ago and actually said, Lake, come here, I need to measure your face. I actually physically, literally measured her face and found out it's 6 inches from brow to chin. And so this is 6 inches because I do not want to do a portrait over life size. It'd be real easy for me to do her face, say, this big. But when you go enlarging a photograph, you really lose, in my opinion, the classic form feeling of a photograph, of a portrait. That's a combination between a photograph and a portrait is a portograph. When you go too big, it doesn't look like a classic portrait. It begins to take on the feeling of a poster, and I don't want to do a poster. So these squares will make sure that I don't get too big. Okay, enough talking. So what I'm going to do, not enough talking evidently, what I'm going to do is do the best I can. This, by the way, is an acrylic glaze, so it's all dry in acrylics, and I'm going to proceed with oils. And I'm going to do the best job I can rendering my granddaughter Lake. If at the end of a season of drawing with my brushes, I feel like I have captured her perfectly, so be it, I won't use these at all. If, on the other hand, and I bat about 50-50 on this, if you'll be able to tell who it is, but if I look at it, scratch my chin and go, no, there's something not quite right, then I will use the cheater method, whatever that may be, okay? And this is what I recommend to you as well, since cheating is legal. Hey, Jan Schutz, I'll come on that in a minute. Why do I feel bad using a grid? Good question. If you haven't heard me explain that, anybody who hasn't heard that, I will repeat that here since Jan asks. So if I nail her likeness perfectly, I can look at it and go, oh man, that is my daughter, that is my granddaughter, a Lake jumping off that canvas, then I won't use this at all. If, on the other hand, after a season of drawing, I go, something's not quite right, then I'll come back and cheat. So, Jan, I've already answered that question. Why am I uncomfortable using a grid? A grid is legal. Projecting, tracing, it's all legal. Professionals do it like crazy. The problem is every time you cheat, your skills are deteriorating. I usually say your brain is shrinking. Of course, I don't mean that literally. So in order for your skills to increase, you need to exercise those muscles. So that's the answer to that question. Okay, let's get going. I'm going to find a couple brushes here. I have my oil paints off to the side here so that I don't need to bump into them or worry about them being in the way. And I'm just picking up on these two brushes a general brownish tone. Okay? So let's go. And as I say, this grid does help me a little bit, but not much. So the first thing I'm going to do, and I'm going to, this is as if the grid wasn't there, I'm looking at the angle. Is her face perfectly vertical, level? The answer is no. It slants. And I would say this angle is about, if this is the center of a clock, it's pointing at about 16 minutes after the hour. Got that? And what I find amazing is that your eye, and I don't think I'm unusual in this regard, is that our eyes can actually see the difference between 15 minutes after the hour and 16 minutes after the hour. I think we can do that. So that's a latitudinal line across her eyes, very traditional. Now let's do another one down the center of her face. And again, 31 minutes after the hour. Do you follow me? So it's not a perfectly vertical, as if this was 30 minutes after the hour. It's like 31 after the hour. And again, it amazes me that our brain can see that. I don't think I'm unusual in that regard. I think everybody can see that. Okay, here, now that's easy, right? And those lines, by the way, both of those are going to be invisible in the final portrait. We don't, I don't want a portrait of my great big crosshairs in the middle of her face. You understand that. Here is the first opportunity to make a big mistake. How much distance is there between her eyes and the bottom of her nose? And the answer is, God only knows. The answer is, I don't know, but I think it's roughly here. Now, we're going to find out, you and me together, eventually, if this guess on my part is accurate or not. Okay, same thing. The side of her head, she has a perfect little indentation in her temple. When I say perfect, I mean very typical of a child. And by the way, is her face pointed straight at us, or is that at an angle? The answer is at an angle. Because look, we see this ear very much. We see very little of this ear. Her temple, we see the temple indentation here. We see none of that here. We can see where it is, but we don't see it because her head is tilted at an angle. So all those things become important. Second, here's my second opportunity to make a mistake, to really screw on this painting. I'm putting it that way on purpose. Here's my second opportunity, because this line may or may not be in the right place. It might have to be an eighth of an inch that way or that way. Same thing here, eighth of an inch, maybe even a quarter. I doubt it, but maybe an eighth of an inch. And those kind of measurements, of course, make a big difference in a portrait. Now, I happen to know that this is accurate because I have my line is right there at the bottom of her face. So let's do the next. And is her mouth straight? By the way, since you see me using this very traditional handle of the brush, let me register a complaint or at least an observation. One of the downsides of using a brush handle in this manner is that the brush handle is tapered, fat here, skinny here. So when you use it, are you talking about this line or this line or the average, the center of the two? Are you with me? If you never thought about that, man, you better, because that angle is way more than enough to ruin your likeness on a portrait. That is why, here, let me, a little bit of a detour. That is why I have played around. This is an invention I never finished yet, but I may come back to it another time. Well, I've played around with devising a tool to do this measurements with, and you can tighten this right here so it stays at a 90 degree if you want to. I made this because these two lines are parallel to each other. So we'll see. I don't know if I'll ever finish that invention or not, but that's why I invented it, for this very reason. But I will tell you that I'm trying to use the center line of this brush. So I'm not using this line or this one. I'm trying to imagine, and that's the hard part, imagine the center line of the brush. But just in case you never thought about such things, it's a good thing. Now let's just for the sake of brain activity, let's use our left hand here. Okay, that already looks like my granddaughter a little bit. My center of the eye. Let's try center of the iris, the center of the pupil. I'm thinking it's about there. This one a little bit further out than that. I'm thinking about there. Okay, let's do the hairline. And here I'm not measuring her anatomy. I'm measuring actually her literal hair, the way her hair falls. Let's just take an approximate, this curve over here, approximately there. I'm thinking. So I hope what you're seeing here is the same thing over here, her hair. What you're seeing here is a very careful, and I consider this all that I'm doing here, except for the grid that's here. This is not cheating. This is doing it the old-fashioned, the hard way. Let's look at her chin. It has a dimple in it. I mean, her chair, she has a split chin, which is cute as can be. What I'm talking about is the intersection from her chin to her cheek. There's a indentation right there, but I'm going to ignore that for the minute and just try to capture the general orientation of that line. Get it? So in portraiture, same as in any other kind of artwork, really, where you're trying to capture something realistic, you start simple and then progress little by little by little. You progress to the more complex. So like this, the bottom of her nose. Of course, her nose is not straight. It's got, down, down, up in it. But for the moment, I'm not paying attention to that. That'll come later. Okay, I'm going to make my first change already. I'm going to raise the bottom of her nose up. Some of you, when I made that mark, you might have gone, that ain't right. It's too low. And if you said that, you were exactly correct. But I didn't see it till right now. So, and here I'm using a Q-tip just to erase my earlier line that I now consider to be erroneous. Let's go ahead and I'm going to get her ring finger over here is the finger that outlines most clearly the edge of her hand, and the edge of her pinky, which is actually a curve. But okay, let me explain something else. So that when you're drawing something complicated, you progress from large to small. So you start with the big shapes. You don't start with small stuff. You start with big stuff. Large to small, simple to complex. Three things. I'm sort of saying the same thing three ways. Large to small, simple to complex, and straight to curved. So you don't try to capture, in the earliest stages, you don't try to capture every single curve accurately, because if you do, it's too complicated. It's too much information. So you start out by turning curves into straight lines. Some of you may be confused. Turning curves into straight lines. What does that mean? Let me find a piece of scrap paper. Perfect. Back of an envelope. And then a big fat marker. Here's what I mean by that. In reality, there may be a curve like this in your life. What just happened? There was wet paint on the back of that envelope. That is so funny. Okay, don't put that dirty envelope up against, but I can finish. Okay, if you try to capture this curve, that would be quite complicated. But if you could, let me change color of markers here so you can, I hope, really see what I'm doing. If you could reduce this curve to a number of hard angles, such as that, say, for instance. See, my red lines are straight. Don't try to draw the blue curve. Instead, reduce it to straight lines like this, and that is very easy to reproduce, right? You just, and you could hold your brush up there and just get the angle right on every one. Once you've got the straight lines accurately portrayed, outlined, rendered, then you, in a sense, you can just say, now round everything off, and you just simply round it off, and you're very close to the blue curve, rather than trying to copy a curve, which is very difficult. So that's what I'm doing here with her face at this point. I am not trying to capture the curves very much. Oh, with one exception, perfect arcs or spheres. You can capture spheres or arcs, right? An arc is a part of a circle, not ellipses, not catenary curves. Not other words I'm looking for and forgetting. No. But you can copy. In other words, again, another detour. In other words, yes, you can trust your brain to draw a circle, right? You can trust your brain. That's called a straight line, if you will. But that's the only one. You cannot trust your brain to copy a French curve. It's tight at one and straight. That is complex. This is simple. Okay? So straight lines and arcs, perfect arcs. Those two things you can trust yourself to render. So for instance, at the top of her head here, it's so close to a perfect arc that I can render it in some sense that way. Okay, let's go over here to the outside of her hand. Again, I'm looking with my eye and seeing, is that perfectly vertical? And it is not quite. The back side of her hand, something like this. I'm going to end this broadcast here shortly. I'm going to look and see how many of your chat comments I missed. Simply because, as you can see, I'm going to be, what I'm doing right here, I'm going to be doing this for quite some time, and I do not think that I have the ability to keep you entertained for a long time while I'm doing the same thing over and over and over. Does that make sense? So I'm going to leave you. This will be the end of broadcast number 493A. When I come back, it'll be 493B, because I'll be doing this for quite a while. So you're more than welcome. Now, by the way, before I go, let me introduce another thought. Now that I've got this much of her face on the canvas, I'm not only measuring this way, I'm measuring, for instance, this line right here, which is the inside of her wrist here. What's it pointing at? So I can say it's pointing at, it's pointing at the inside crease of her eye right there. So according to that, is that line accurate? And the answer is, I'm going to actually tilt it just a tiny bit more than I had, okay? So the more things you get rendered, the more comparison you're going to do. Likewise, this mark here, and again, I trust you can see these red lines here, which, by the way, are rendered with a watercolor pencil, so that if I need to rub them off late in the process, I can do so very easily with a damp rag. Again, I'm going to change my mind here. And the first line that I put down for the inside of her left arm, I think was too far in, so I've moved it out. Likewise, the outside of her arm was too far in, so I've moved it out. Let's just do a little bit of her outside of her hair. Now, I took this picture of Lakey Poo. um, this line also is erroneous, is wrong. It's too far down. I took this picture 2 days ago. She was in my office right here, and without any formal anything, I said, Lakey, let me take your picture. And she stood there, and I said, okay, now put your on this chair, and so on. So it was a very, very quick operation. She had no idea what I was doing. I don't think she suspected anything. But I think it's charming. Now, it's not necessarily the kind of portrait that her mother, would necessarily approve of, because, I don't think she hadn't gotten a bath that day. I don't think her hair is as clean as her mom would like it to be. But all of that is, to me, it's a perfect candid shot because she is so natural. She's just looks like a real little girl. Okay, so once again, I'm also already making adjustments to this arm. And I put that Q-tip down somewhere. It disappeared on me. We still there? Yep. Hang on, let me go get Q-tips. Of course, are not the only answer here. I just grabbed one because it was so nearby. I could use a dry brush to do the same thing, of course, and we'll probably do so shortly. So when I start feeling that I've got myself in adequate trouble just drawing it free-handed, then I will indeed do some measuring. And maybe I'll bring you in to let you watch me do some of that measuring when the time comes. But what you see me doing now is I would consider not cheating at all. Well, ever so slightly, because I have these grid marks on there, but it's not like a real grid that I'm drawing inside each square. I'm just using them as very approximate location devices. A little bit of shading. One thing I've learned is you really cannot capture a likeness. Really, well, I don't know. It's pretty hard to capture a likeness without some rounding of forms, without some shading, because it's hard to reduce a face to purely linear abstraction and see it as a likeness. So I'm going to go ahead and do a little bit of shading already in this early stages of this drawing. Now, let me point out something pretty obvious, I think. That is that at some point in your portrait journey, capturing a believable human face is fairly easy. And that should, for those of you who perhaps are just starting your portrait journey, that's a milestone on your way to being able to capture a perfect likeness. Is, first of all, you have to be able to capture not a perfect likeness, but simply a believable human head and face. And certainly myself pretty well past that mile. This will look. And you see that kind of thing done a lot. You see a lot of artists who use figures and faces to create beautiful paintings. I think, for instance, of the Russian Vladimir Vologov, who I watched some of his just the other day. Vladimir Vologov. He specializes in doing paintings of beautiful women, and but he's not trying to capture a perfect likeness of each face. He's just using the model that he has photographed as, in my opinion, as a model for an idealized human face, not necessarily a likeness. And I just want to point out that doing that is much easier than capturing a perfect likeness. But it's for most of us, most of us, that's a stage through which you must pass. You must achieve that degree of proficiency before you can proceed to capturing a perfect likeness. Okay, so at this point, I'm going to tell you that that's a believable face, and it's darling. It's a darling little girl, but no, it is not my granddaughter. So before I start measuring, though, I'm going to do a couple tricks. Well, I'll show you one right now. If you watch me often, you know it well. Hang on just a second. Let me run over here and get my backup camera, my backup phone. I hope the battery is not dead. That happens sometimes. I pick it up and it turns off because the battery is at 0. If the battery is on, then I will show you here in a moment my first, if you will, line of defense, first line of correction toward getting this face fixed. Because it, even though, again, it looks like a darling little girl, my granddaughter Lake is not jumping. Here's Lake right here as we speak. Say hi, Lake. Hi. Now I'm going to do your portrait, sweet girl. Finally. Is that fun?
Yeah.
Yep. She's been pestering me for over a year. Isn't that right?
Yeah.
Okay, so my phone warmed up. Yeah, the battery's low, but it's not dead. So just again, I'll let you watch this before I sign off and work in silence for a while. Come back later. So I'm going to simply take a picture now and make sure that my phone is paired. Okay, I'm just going to take a picture, and here's all I'm going to do. Then I'm going to open without getting fancy. I'm just looking at this image. This is correction number 1. So is this cheating? I mean, you know, John Singer Sargent didn't have a cell phone. Poor guy. The advantage here is that now that I'm seeing her face in a smaller size, very often I can see things that need to be fixed. I already do. The corners of her mouth are turned down too far. What else? This shade in her brow comes down too far. There we go. So just simply seeing the small image, it's comparable in John Singer Sargent's day to backing up 10 or 15 feet from the subject matter so that you can see it smaller. Or the name for that is sight size method. It's related to the sight size method of painting. Just Google that, sight size, and you'll see. So this is sort of like the high-tech version of sight sizing, if you will. Okay? Let me see what else needs to be changed. I'm going to bring this side of her cheek down, just a chin down just a tiny bit. The next step, okay, since we've gone this far, I'll go ahead and show you. The next step then is to put sorry, let me find it here. There we go. Is to put that photograph that I just took. I'm assuming, come on. The next step is to put that photograph next to the photograph of her face. So here's how that's done. Come on, come on. Phone working very slowly. Here we go. There. And there's her face. Okay, so that's, let me save that. That's step number 2. The first step was just taking a picture, especially with the phone. By the way, while we're on the subject, does it work for an iPad? No, 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 no. Does not. Does not work with an iPad. Why? Because the iPad picture is too big. It is, in fact, the smallness of the phone, the smartphone screen, that makes this work. Oh, come on. Okay, so there we go. Step number 1, take a picture. And just by looking at the small photograph, you can see changes that you missed from your bare eye. Number 2, put them side by side. Now you can see things that you might have missed just by looking at the small screen. And since I've gone this far, and this is review for many of you, so forgive me, those of you who know what I'm going to do next. The next thing I'm going to do is take this image side by side, go into Edit. This phone is working extraordinarily slow today. I'm sorry about that. Then Transform and Flip Horizontal. Boom, check. Oh my goodness. Now I can see all kinds of mistakes on my, when I look, because this is comparable to holding your portrait in front of a mirror, which if you don't have a cell phone, oh my goodness, I beg of you to use a mirror when you're doing a portrait. I just absolutely, I said at my painters group last week when I was there, and it's a little bit snarky, but take it from me. I can, when I'm judging a show, or when I'm walking at the state fair, you know, a place where there's a bunch of entry-level amateur painters working, I can walk down the aisle and go, that one,